Yay, thank you. Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Jason, and thank you, Ruth, for putting on this training and including public involvement in it. I know most of the folks in the Turnpike are pretty familiar with public involvement. We've been working with them in developing the new way we're doing it during COVID. Jason asked me to kind of do an overview for public involvement during PD&E and kind of talk about the differences between public involvement during PD&E and public involvement during design. I think I muted myself. And I'm going to start with kind of a spectrum of public involvement by phase. During planning and during PD&E, we are really heavy into two-way communication. Who is out there? Who are the people that are potentially affected by our project? And what do they think? We're required by federal law to make sure that anybody who's interested or anybody who's affected has the opportunity to take part in our processes. So then as we move into design, we're a little more, we're still doing two-way in some cases. And then as we move into construction, it really becomes more one-way. The kinds of things that people need to know during construction, like detours and MOT and things like that. So communication by phase, you know, in planning, we're really talking about transportation goals, future transportation needs. And then as we move into PD&E, we've looked at those needs, we've looked at data, and now we're at the point of communicating potential alternatives and then arriving at a final recommendation with the help of the public. Then, as you know, when we move into design, we're talking about design features, specific design features, and plans for construction. And then construction, of course, is more one-way communication, lane closures, detours, temporary impacts. Although during construction, we sometimes do have communication with the folks on the ground, with the business owners and the people that are going to be impacted by our construction process. So between design and PD&E, in design, you have a community awareness plan. In PD&E, we have public involvement plans that kind of map out exactly how we're going to proceed with our public involvement processes during PD&E. We're looking at, and you're among the first to know this, a way that we can combine a public involvement plan, a community awareness plan, from the beginning, from the very beginning of planning all the way through construction, and make it a continuous process. But we're just in the early stages of thinking that through. Both in PD&E and design, you'll be doing presentations to local governments and MPOs if you're in an MPO area. As needed one-on-one meetings with individuals or agency representatives, public meetings. In design, you may have one, you may have more depending on the controversy or the complexity of your project. During PD&E, you're probably going to have a kickoff meeting, one or more alternatives meetings, and then many times a public hearing. I've been told that Turnpike does public hearings for all projects during design. In PD&E, public hearings are required for new capacity, added or reduced capacity, new interchanges, or new alignment, projects with new alignment. So your major PD&E public involvement milestones are going to include that kickoff meeting that I mentioned earlier, which basically tells the local government folks and the local communities that we have started the environmental study. Sometimes the public kickoff meeting is combined with a county or city commission meeting. Sometimes the public kickoff meeting is a separate meeting from that meeting. Sometimes kickoffs are a letter. So it can mean a variety of different things. And then alternative public meetings are generally what we call public information meetings, where people can come in and talk to staff and learn about the alternatives that we're considering. There's usually a presentation given in an alternatives meeting. And then the public hearing is where we are at the stage of presenting the alternative that we are recommending for construction after talking to the public and to all our different stakeholders. Okay, someone's responded that at Turnpike we don't always do a public hearing in design. Thank you for that. Actually, Jennifer Stoltz told me that you do, so we'll say for now that you don't. But I'm assuming that a public hearing is done in design, depending on the controversy and complexity of the project. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a public meeting and a public hearing. Less and less, because we're learning more and more, but it used to be that every meeting we had was a hearing. When I say used to be, I mean many years ago. Now we try to emphasize that there is a difference between a public meeting and a public hearing, and it's important to know and understand that difference because they're not the same. Public meetings are informal, and there is a lot of flexibility on how you do them. They're generally used during the project to collect community input, to just let the public know where we're at, what the status of our project is. Hearings are formal and follow very specific requirements and generally are more expensive as well. So public hearings have specific laws that relate to them and how we do our meeting notifications. So you can see why it's important to use the correct terminology between a public meeting and a public hearing. Hearings may be required when there's a significant change in design after PD&E, or a significant time has elapsed since the approval of the PD&E. There are certain times when a public hearing is required by state law. Florida Section 339-155 in the Florida statutes requires hearings for, as I mentioned before, capacity improvement, new interchanges, or new roadways or limited access facilities. In addition, you may know that when we change a median opening, public hearings are required if the median change was not included in the PD&E process. And I want to say this because it doesn't relate just to PD&E, but I hear every now and then someone say, oh, we're not required to do certain notifications during design or during construction. I just want you to keep this in your mind that Florida statute requires that all meetings, hearings, and workshops, regardless of the phase that they're in, require that you notice that meeting in the Florida Administrative Register and on the department's website. So please keep that in mind. So a little bit more about public hearings and the types of formats. All of the notification requirements for a meeting or a hearing are in Part 1, Chapter 11 of the PD&E manual. The start time is determined by what best meets the need for your specific project. Generally, our public hearings start around 5:30 in the pre-COVID world and usually last a couple of hours. They often start with an open house format followed by the formal presentation and the formal comment period. There's no predetermined end time. The public hearing ends when everyone has had an opportunity to comment. And then finally, public hearings have a script with standard statements that must be used, including Title VI language. So make sure that you are looking at that Chapter 11, being very clear on what's required in a public meeting or public hearing, and that you're using the appropriate scripts that are required. Draft PD&E documents have to be made available to the public. This is in the federal law. They need to be available at least 21 days prior to the hearing in a location close to the project. And that's been a challenge for us during COVID because a lot of places are not open to the public. Oftentimes we use libraries or local government offices or our own offices, but those have been closed to the public. So we've been challenged with how do we make our PD&E documents available to the public. And one of the ideas that we've had is that you could do, a person who wants to see the documents could make an appointment with the project manager or someone associated with the project to take a look at those documents. You can also email the documents out or otherwise make them available. If you do have them in a location, that location has to be ADA compliant and easily accessible. And there's a list of some of those locations. And then also the PD&E documents should also be posted on the project website. Right now during the COVID times, we have on the public involvement website guidance for how to do public meetings. So be sure to go there and take a look at the different kinds of guidance that we're providing. And then documenting public hearing. Traditionally, we have a court reporter who comes to the public hearing and prepares a transcript. Documentation will include all the oral and written comments that you've received at the meeting and in other ways. The presentation script is included in the documentation, and any handouts, brochures, maps, boards, pictures of the boards, and those kinds of things should all be included in your documentation. The public record stays open for an additional comment period for additional comments, at least 10 days following the hearing. Right now, we're suggesting that you extend that time because we're oftentimes putting stuff up on websites and it takes people a little more time to get to them sometimes. So please feel free to go beyond the 10 calendar days, depending on your project. And then after that period, the public hearing is officially closed. The copies of the transcript and the presentation script are in the project file and referenced in the final environmental document. So with that, I'd like to tell you about the public involvement resources that are available to you. We have a new public involvement page on the Office of Policy Planning website. That's where we're able to update very quickly all of the COVID public involvement guidance. You can see here that our most recent public involvement guidance was issued on August the 3rd. As we go through the reduction of cases, we anticipate there will be new guidance. We'll be writing new guidance sometime in the next month or so, we hope. In addition, you can see there that we have virtual resources to tell you how to set up and host a virtual public meeting. We have sample PowerPoint slides, and we've got other information to help you carry on your public involvement activities, even with the situation that we're going through now. In addition, on this page, you'll find links to the Public Involvement Handbook, the PD&E Chapter 11, Public Involvement Chapter, and other materials. So please feel free to go to that page and become familiar with the resources that are there. And finally, we've been spending a lot of time over the last, since March, working with districts on how to do their public meetings and how to do their public involvement. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, call me, or send me an email. We've been reviewing plans, the plans for public involvement meetings and hearings. I just got the plan from District 4 on their 10th Avenue public hearing that they're going to have as soon as things open up. So I'm happy to take a look at your plans, your safety plans, and help you work through those. So with that, thank you all for coming, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Rusty. I know we're bumping right up against noon and this is lunch, but there are a couple of questions. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to say the questions to you. So one of them is, what does significant time has elapsed mean? what is the valid, oh, sorry, I need to expand this thing so I can actually read it. Oh, I lost it.
I got it. What's the validity of the public hearing in number of years?
What's the validity of the public hearing in the number of years? Okay, I just have to understand the question. We know that things change very quickly in Florida. New neighborhoods, new roads, new local areas pop up overnight. So if we've done a public hearing or based on a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old look at demographics, for instance, or look at traffic conditions, I think we need to think about going back and making sure that all of our data that we used in our assumptions is still up to date. So I don't know that there's a single answer, that there's a single number of years that it remains valid. But I think when you've gotten past a couple of years, you probably ought to start looking to make sure that your data is still relevant. Does that answer the question, you think?
Yeah, I think so. They can give us some feedback.
Okay.
Let's see. So there are a few more. So when they make an appointment, must the location where they go to, it must still be close enough to the project location as an appointment, right?
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. For a virtual meeting, should we only have a start time and not an end time? If we have an end time, should we stay online until that end time?
That's a fabulous question that actually came up last night on a public meeting that District 5 did. I think one of the things that's happening is that we're so used to doing our meetings for 2 hours, 5:30 to 7:30, that now in the virtual world, we're still scheduling them 5:30 to 7:30, even though we're not intermingling with people. We're not having conversations with people that take up those 2 hours. Our presentation may be 20 minutes long. All the presentations that I've been looking at have been about 20 minutes long, 20 to 25 minutes. I would suggest, so one thing I'm seeing happening in the districts is that they're doing the presentation twice. Maybe they do a presentation at 5:30. They allow a half an hour or so for the presentation, and then they allow enough time for any questions. At that point, they don't have to do it a second time unless they have enough people that want to see it a second time, or that are hanging around, or that pop in. But I think one thing you need to do is make it very clear in your meeting notification. If you're going to do the presentation twice, then say you're going to do it twice. Say you're going to do it at 5:30 and you're going to do it again at 6:30. Otherwise, you only have to do it once, especially if you know it's a smaller project and you don't have that many people calling in. I think that's how I understood your question.
Yeah, I think that was good. There's a couple more if you've got a couple seconds.
Sure, I'm fine.
Is oh great, thank you, Rusty. During the current COVID-19 environment, can the open house portion of a hybrid public hearing be omitted to reduce face-to-face, i.e. close interaction with the public?
Yeah, certainly in those areas that are phase 1, and by phase 1, I mean Broward, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade counties, you cannot do face-to-face meetings right now. Phase 1 is coming from the governor's office. Those are those areas that have a high incidence of COVID cases. All the other counties are phase 2, and so you are able to do face-to-face meetings. You need to work with me and work with, and also get approval from the district secretary to have face-to-face meetings. But the hybrid guidance that's on the public involvement website contains the safety information and the kinds of things that you need to put in your plan for a face-to-face meeting.
Great. Another question was, what changes are foreseen in the COVID-19 guidance? Anyone focus?
What changes? I'm not sure if the question is.
I guess the question is, okay, the guidance was just released. Are we anticipating, like, because this whole situation is very fluid. Since it was released, are there any things that are anticipated to change anytime soon? And if so, what those might be?
Okay, well, one thing, and this is just my personal thing, is that I'd like to go back and rewrite the guidance because I think there are a few things that are confusing. So now that I'm getting all the questions from people, what did you mean by this or that? So that's, don't think that I'm going to go back and rewrite it at this point until there is actually some kind of substantive change. And the substantive change would be if there is a sudden extreme reduction in cases across the state, or if there is a sudden increase in cases. So I could see potentially us all going, the whole state going to phase 3, depending on what the governor's guidance is, or the whole state going back to phase 1, depending on the increase in cases. So I don't have a crystal ball. If I had had one back in March and April when we wrote the original guidance, if any of us had, we would be much better prepared. But at this point, what I can tell you is that we do anticipate that we will continue to allow hybrid and virtual, or mostly hybrid meetings in the post-COVID world. The secretary is very much a proponent of having multiple ways of doing it. So I anticipate that our meetings will be almost always hybrid meetings, meaning both face-to-face and virtual.